A beggar girl interacts with a millionaire's sick son. But please comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The desperate weeping echoed through the corridors of the private hospital, cutting through the heavy silence of the early morning like a sharp blade. The 30-year-old widowed millionaire held the small, cold hands of his son, watching the child's chest rise and fall with increasing difficulty. The monitors around the bed emitted irregular beeps that seemed to count the seconds of a cruel hourglass. He had built an empire based on smart investments on Wall Street, amassing a fortune that many considered obscene. His investments in pharmaceutical company stocks ironically yielded multi-million-dollar monthly dividends, but all that money proved useless in the face of his only son's fragility. The most renowned doctors in the city had already paraded through the room, all reaching the same devastating conclusion. The disease that consumed the 4-year-old boy remained a mystery. The father squeezed his eyes shut, trying to hold back the tears that insisted on welling up. His wealth had grown exponentially in recent years, with investments in cryptocurrency that had multiplied like magic, turning him into one of the richest men in the metropolis. He had even diversified his assets by buying gold and keeping reserves in dollars and euros. But all that financial security crumbled like sand between his fingers when he looked at his son's pale face. He decided to leave the stuffy room and walk through the hospital gardens, seeking fresh air for his lungs that seemed to refuse to function properly. The early morning was cold, and he sat down on a marble bench, letting the tears finally flow freely. His sobs echoed among the trees, a sound that contrasted brutally with the image of success he projected in the business world. It was then that a small figure emerged from the shadows, walking towards him with hesitant steps. It was a girl who appeared to be around 2 years old, although something in her eyes suggested an older age. Her clothes were dirty and torn, her bare feet bruised by the rough concrete. Her disheveled hair framed a face that was too thin, with sunken cheeks that betrayed days without adequate food. "Why are you crying, mister?" she asked with a soft voice, but surprisingly clear for someone so small. He looked up, annoyed by the interruption. "Go away, kid. This isn't a place for you." But she didn't move. Instead, she came closer, and he could see that her eyes had a strange color, as if they changed hue depending on the light. "Your son is sick," she said, not as a question, but as an absolute statement. The shock left him momentarily speechless. How could a street child know about his son? "How do you—" "I can help," she interrupted, holding out a small, dirty hand. "I can make him better." He laughed bitterly, a sound that came out more like a bark. "Girl, the best doctors in the country can't help my son. How can you, "Let me try," she insisted, and there was something in her voice that made him stop. A certainty that shouldn't exist in someone so young. Against all common sense, he got up and followed her back to the hospital. The security guards tried to stop her from entering, but something in the millionaire's determined look made them step back. They went up in silence to the room where the boy lay unconscious, surrounded by machines that maintained his vital functions. The girl approached the bed without hesitation, ignoring the whispered protests of the nurses. She reached out and gently touched the boy's feverish face, closing her eyes as if she were concentrating deeply. What happened in the following minutes defied all logic. The boy's breathing, which had been labored and irregular for weeks, began to normalize. Color gradually returned to his cheeks, and the monitors showed a stabilization that the doctors couldn't explain. Then, for the first time in 3 weeks, the boy opened his eyes. "Daddy." His voice was weak but clear. The millionaire fell to his knees beside the bed, holding his son's hand with a force that he feared would hurt him. Tears of relief streamed down his face as he looked at the mysterious girl who remained standing next to the bed, watching the scene with an expression impossible to decipher. The doctors rushed into the room, alerted by the changes on the monitors. Dr. Miller, the chief cardiologist, checked the vital signs with growing disbelief. This is impossible, he murmured, checking and rechecking the data. The millionaire turned to the girl, but she had retreated to a corner of the room, as if trying to become invisible. Her large eyes watched him with a mixture of fear and hope that reminded him of an injured animal. "How did you do that?" he asked, his voice trembling with emotion. She just shook her head, as if she herself didn't know how to explain it. "He's going to be okay now," she said simply. That night, while the doctors continued their perplexed examinations, the millionaire made a decision that would change their lives forever. He couldn't let that child go back to the streets, not after what he had witnessed. His net worth allowed him to take care of dozens of people, and this girl clearly needed help, but something in the way she had touched his son, in the certainty in her young voice, deeply disturbed him. Who was this child, and how did a seemingly abandoned girl possess a gift that modern medicine couldn't explain? 3 months had passed since the girl had arrived at the mansion, and the transformation in the house was palpable. The millionaire's son, who had previously spent his days confined to his room, now ran through the corridors with an energy that his doctors considered miraculous. His blood tests showed results that defied any scientific explanation, as if the mysterious disease had simply disappeared from his body. The mansion, built with the profit of years of successful investments, had become a palace of contradictions. In the Italian marble halls, where before only the widower's lonely footsteps echoed, now resonated the laughter of the 2 children. The boy followed the girl through every room, as if he feared that she might disappear if he took his eyes off her for even a second. But not everyone in the house welcomed the new resident with joy. The stepmother, a 35-year-old woman who had married the millionaire 2 years after the loss of his first wife, watched the girl with growing suspicion. Her original plan to get rid of her stepson, to ensure full access to the family inheritance, had been completely frustrated by the boy's inexplicable recovery. "She's not normal," she whispered to her husband during dinner, as she watched the girl play silently with pieces of bread. "No child does what she did. This isn't natural." The millionaire, whose investment funds continued to yield astronomical figures even in times of economic crisis, preferred to ignore his wife's comments. His gratitude for his son's salvation was greater than any doubt he might have about the girl's methods. After all, results were results, and he had built his fortune relying on concrete evidence. The housekeeper, a 60-year-old lady who had worked for the family since before the boy was born, had a different perspective. She watched the child with growing curiosity, noticing details that escaped others. Whenever the girl touched the plants in the garden during her morning walks, they bloomed out of season, creating explosions of color that contrasted with the gray of the approaching winter. "Sir," she said one morning, finding her boss in his office surrounded by financial reports, "may I ask a question about the girl?" He looked up from the charts, showing the growth of his assets. "Of course, what would you like to know?" "She talks to herself sometimes, words I don't recognize. It sounds like an old language, maybe Native American." The housekeeper hesitated before continuing. "And there's something else. Yesterday, when she was in the garden, I saw a butterfly perched on her hand for almost 10 minutes. After she released it, the butterfly flew straight to a dead rosebush, and this morning the rosebush was blooming." The millionaire frowned. His analytical mind, trained to assess risks and opportunities in the financial market, struggled to process information that didn't fit into any known logical model. Maybe they're just coincidences. But the coincidences began to accumulate in a disturbing way. Small accidents began to happen around the house. Expensive vases that had cost the equivalent of months of income from his stocks fell for no apparent reason. Antique mirrors shattered during the early morning, and the latest generation LED lights flickered constantly, even after specialized electricians checked the entire installation. The stepmother took advantage of each incident to fuel her theories. "You see," she said to her husband after a crystal vase shattered on the floor of the main room, "this never happened before she arrived. She brought something bad to our house." The boy's behavior also worried the father. The child, once sociable and outgoing, now refused to play with other children or participate in activities that didn't include the girl. When she went out to the garden, he stood at the window, watching her every move with an intensity that bordered on obsession. "Son," the millionaire tried to talk to him one afternoon, "how about we visit the club? You always liked swimming in the pool." "I can't leave her alone," replied the boy, without taking his eyes off the window where he watched the girl picking flowers. "She needs me here." "But why? She's safe with us." The boy turned to his father with a strangely mature expression. "She told me that bad people want to hurt her. I need to protect her." This conversation left the millionaire deeply disturbed. Who were these bad people, and why did a 4-year-old feel responsible for protecting someone? During the 4th week of the 3rd month, the situation reached a critical point. The stepmother had organized a dinner for important investors, an opportunity to expand the network of contacts that could generate new multi-million-dollar deals. She had meticulously planned the evening, choosing the menu, decoration, and guest list with surgical precision. But when the girl came down to dinner, wearing a simple dress that the housekeeper had bought for her, her presence caused an unexpected effect on the guests. One of the investors, a man known for his coldness in business, began to cry without explanation when she passed near his chair. Another guest, a socialite famous for her arrogance, suddenly knelt down and hugged the girl, whispering apologies for something she had done years ago. "What's going on here?" the stepmother whispered furiously to her husband, watching how her carefully selected guests behaved completely out of the ordinary. The millionaire didn't know how to answer. His ability to predict and control situations, a skill that had earned him billions in profits over the years, seemed completely useless when it came to the mysterious girl who had saved his son. After the guests left, leaving the stepmother humiliated and furious, she made a decision that would change everything. The next day, she discreetly contacted a private investigator using money from her own account to prevent her husband from finding out. She needed to know exactly who this child was and where she had come from. "I want you to find out everything about her," she told the investigator, a thin man with calculating eyes. "Family, background, anything that can help me understand what she really is." Meanwhile, the girl continued her silent routine around the house, seemingly oblivious to the tensions that her presence caused. She played in the garden, talked quietly with the boy in a language that sounded more like melodious whispers, and every night, after everyone was asleep, she walked barefoot through the corridors of the mansion. The housekeeper, sleepless for weeks due to her growing concern, decided to follow the girl during one of these nocturnal walks. What she saw left her completely perplexed. The child went to the room where the boy was sleeping and simply sat next to the bed, placing her small hand on his forehead and whispering inaudible words. In the dark room, the housekeeper swore she saw a soft light emanating from the girl's hands, an almost imperceptible luminosity that pulsed in the same rhythm as the boy's breathing. When she finished whatever she was doing, the boy sighed deeply, and his face, which had previously shown signs of agitation, relaxed completely. The housekeeper retreated silently, her heart racing. 40 years working for wealthy families hadn't prepared her to witness something like this, but an old memory began to form in her mind. Fragments of stories that her own grandmother used to tell about special people who were born with inexplicable gifts. The next morning, she woke up with a disturbing certainty. The girl was not only different, she was something that the modern world had forgotten existed. And if the stepmother's suspicions were correct, even if for the wrong reasons, perhaps the whole family was in danger in a way that no amount of money or power could solve. The investigators' report arrived on a rainy morning of the 4th month, when the golden leaves of autumn covered the mansion's gardens like a melancholic carpet. The stepmother read each word with growing disturbance, her hands trembling as she absorbed information that seemed straight out of a fantastical tale. The girl had been born in a small rural village lost in the mountains, a place that didn't appear on modern maps and that the locals simply called the Healer's Hollow. For generations, the families in that location had practiced an ancestral medicine based on touch and the use of extremely rare medicinal herbs, knowledge passed from mother to daughter through oral traditions that dated back centuries. Her biological mother was named Rose Santos, the stepmother read aloud to herself, daughter of Hope Santos, recognized as the greatest healer in the region. Rose abandoned the hollow at 17, refusing to follow the family traditions, and came to the metropolis in search of a different life. The report continued with details that chilled the stepmother's blood. Rose had worked as a cleaner in back-alley medical clinics, places where unscrupulous doctors performed illegal procedures for large sums of money. It was in one of these clinics that she met the girl's father, a mysterious man who disappeared even before the child was born. Pregnant and alone, Rose had tried to return home, but was rejected by her own mother, who considered her pregnancy a betrayal of the family's sacred traditions. With nowhere to go, she gave birth on the street, dying a few days later due to complications of childbirth and severe malnutrition. The child survived only because a retired nurse found her and cared for her during the first years, murmured the stepmother, feeling a strange chill spread through her body. But when the nurse passed away, the girl returned to the streets. What disturbed the stepmother the most, however, were the reports about the Santos family's abilities. According to the investigator, they were not ordinary healers. They possessed a unique genetic lineage, developed over centuries of isolation, that allowed them to literally absorb diseases and pain from other people, healing through touch, but paying a physical price for it. They age faster, she read, and their lives are shorter due to the wear and tear of carrying the suffering of others. Therefore, tradition dictates that only one daughter per generation can fully inherit the gift, while the others must renounce it to preserve the lineage. The stepmother put away the report with trembling hands. Now she understood why the girl seemed so physically fragile, why her eyes carried a sadness impossible for her age. She wasn't just healing her stepson, she was literally absorbing his illness, transferring it to her own tiny body. That same day, she sought out her husband in his office, where he was analyzing performance charts of his Bitcoin investments. The cryptocurrency market had been especially favorable, and his investments had yielded a few more million in profits. "We need to talk about the girl," she said, closing the door behind her. He looked up from the numbers on the screen, annoyed by the interruption. "What is it now? She's been perfect. Our son has never been healthier." "That's exactly the problem." The stepmother approached the desk, placing the report before him. "Read this, everything." The millionaire read in silence, his expression gradually changing from irritation to surprise, then to horror. When he finished, he pushed the papers away as if they were burning his hands. This can't be real." "It is real, yes. And there's more." The stepmother sat down in the leather armchair in front of the desk. "I've been watching her. Every night she goes to your son's room and does something to him. The housekeeper has seen it too. She's transferring his illness to herself." The millionaire remained silent for long minutes, processing the information. His rational mind struggled against evidence that defied everything he believed in. "Even if this is true, she saved my son. I can't just—" "You can, yes." The stepmother's voice became harsher. "You can, and you must. That child is slowly killing herself to keep your son alive. And when she dies, what will happen to him? Do you want to carry that guilt for the rest of your life? During the following weeks, the stepmother intensified her psychological campaign. She began to spread subtle rumors among the maids about strange accidents that happened when the girl was around. She hired a new housekeeper, a superstitious woman who was frightened by any unexplained noise, and began to attribute all the problems of the house to the child's presence. "That girl brought bad karma to our family," whispered the new housekeeper to the other maids. "Ever since she arrived, strange things happen. Yesterday I saw her talking to the plants in the garden, and they moved as if they understood what she was saying." The millionaire began to look at the girl with different eyes, noticing details that had previously gone unnoticed. She really did seem to be getting thinner, paler. Her games with her son were less energetic, and sometimes she leaned against the walls as if she were dizzy. On a particularly difficult afternoon, when he found the girl sleeping in the garden, exhausted after playing with her son for only an hour, he made a terrible decision. Maybe his wife was right. Maybe he was being selfish, allowing a child to sacrifice herself for the well-being of another. "We need to find a suitable place for her," he told his wife that night. "Some institution that can take care of her properly." The stepmother smiled, but it was a cold, calculating smile. "I've already done some research. There's an orphanage in the neighboring town run by nuns. They have experience with special children." In fact, she had chosen the furthest orphanage she could find, a place that was a 3-hour drive away and had a reputation for being too strict. Her hope was that far from them, the girl would gradually be forgotten, especially by the stepson who was so interfering with her plans. What neither of them expected was the boy's reaction when he heard about the decision. He panicked completely, clinging to the girl and screaming that he couldn't live without her. Throughout the night, he cried inconsolably, and in the morning he again showed symptoms of the mysterious disease: high fever, difficulty breathing, and an alarming pallor. "You see," said the stepmother to her husband, forcing fake tears. "He's so attached to her that his own health is being affected. This isn't healthy. We need to make this separation now, before it's too late for both of them." The older housekeeper, who had witnessed the whole situation, tried to intervene. "Sir, with all due respect, I think you're making a mistake. That girl isn't a danger. She's a gift." But the millionaire, consumed by guilt and pressured by his wife, had already made his decision. The money he had earned over the years, building his financial empire, couldn't buy peace of mind when it came to the well-being of his son. The next morning, he entered the room where the girl was sleeping and woke her up gently. She opened her big eyes and looked at him with an expression that seemed to understand exactly what was to come. "You're going to a place where they can take better care of you," he said, avoiding looking directly into her eyes. "A place with other children where you can be happy." The girl didn't cry, didn't protest. She just nodded with a disturbing maturity for someone her age. "And the boy? Will he be okay?" The question cut the millionaire's heart like a knife. He will learn to be okay." 2 hours later, a black car was parked at the entrance to the mansion, waiting to take the girl away. She followed the millionaire to the vehicle, carrying only a small teddy bear that the old housekeeper had given her. Before getting into the car, she turned to the mansion and whispered something so low that only the driver could hear. They were words in a strange language, but that somehow sounded like a melancholic farewell, or perhaps a promise. As the car disappeared around the bend in the road, taking with it the girl who had saved his son, the millionaire felt an emptiness in his chest that all his money couldn't fill. And in the room upstairs, the boy screamed for his lost protector, his tears anticipating a pain that was still to come. The Sacred Heart Orphanage sat on a secluded hill, surrounded by high walls that looked more like a fortress than a home for children. The Mother Superior, a 60-year-old woman with piercing eyes, received the girl with an expression that mixed curiosity and concern. There was something about the child that bothered her, an aura of mystery she couldn't explain. "What's your name, dear?" asked the nun, kneeling down to be at the girl's height. "I don't have a name," she replied simply, hugging the teddy bear against her chest. "People call me different things." The Mother Superior frowned. It was unusual for a 4-year-old child not to have a proper name, but she had seen strange cases over her 30 years running the orphanage. "Well, then let's choose a nice name for you. How about Mary?" The girl shook her head silently, as if the name didn't fit her identity. During the first few days, she remained almost completely silent, watching the other children with those big eyes that seemed to see more than they should. Meanwhile, in the distant mansion, chaos had set in. The boy fell into a deep depression, refusing to eat, play, or even get out of bed. Within days, all the symptoms of his mysterious disease returned with multiplied force. His temperature rose dangerously, his breathing became labored, and the doctors began to speak again in somber terms about his prognosis. The millionaire watched his son waste away, with a guilt that grew like a tumor in his chest. His investments continued to yield astronomical profits. His stocks in technology companies had soared. His fixed income funds generated multi-million-dollar monthly dividends, and his gold reserves constantly appreciated in value. But all this wealth seemed like a cruel joke in the face of reality. His son was dying, and it was he himself who had removed the only person capable of saving him. "I told you this was going to happen," murmured the stepmother, but her voice lacked its previous conviction. Seeing the real suffering of her stepson, even she began to question her motivations. Perhaps she had made a terrible mistake in manipulating her husband. The old housekeeper, who had been fired after protesting against the removal of the girl, appeared at the mansion on a rainy morning. She forced her way in, ignoring the protests of the new maid, and found the millionaire in his office, surrounded by financial charts that he couldn't concentrate on reading. "Sir," she said without ceremony, "you need to bring her back. Now." "I can't," he replied, running his hands over his tired face. "It would be selfish of me. She was sacrificing herself for my son. And now your son is sacrificing himself for her," retorted the housekeeper. "Don't you see? They are connected in a way that goes beyond understanding. By separating them, you have doomed them both." That night, the millionaire made a desperate decision. He drove to the orphanage, determined to bring the girl back, regardless of the consequences. He found the Mother Superior in the garden, tending to a bed of roses that had mysteriously bloomed out of season. "I've come to get the girl," he said without preamble. The nun looked at him with a strange expression. "I expected you to come sooner. She has been causing interesting situations here." She led him to the inner courtyard, where about 15 children were playing. But they weren't ordinary games. There was a girl with Down syndrome who, according to the doctors, would never be able to walk properly, running and laughing like any normal child. A boy who had arrived at the orphanage with severe burns showed smooth, healthy skin. Several children suffering from chronic malnutrition seemed robust and full of energy. "How is this possible?" murmured the millionaire. "She touches each of them every night," explained the Mother Superior. "I see her in the hallways, going from room to room, putting her little hands on their sleeping faces. At first, I thought it was just childish affection, but then the children began to improve in ways that medicine cannot explain." "And her? How is she?" The nun's expression became worried, weaker and weaker, pale. "Sometimes she faints in the courtyard, and other children have to carry her inside. She is transferring the suffering of all of them to herself." The millionaire found the girl in the garden, sitting alone under a tree that should have been dormant in winter, but which bore impossible white flowers. She looked even smaller than when she left his house, more fragile, as if she were slowly fading away. "I've come to get you," he said, kneeling before her. She looked up, and he could see that her color had changed again. Now they were a deep blue, almost violet. "Is the boy okay?" "No, he needs you." We all need you." For a moment she seemed to hesitate. "The other children here need me too. I know, but you can't save everyone. Not alone." She remained silent for long minutes, and he could see an internal struggle unfolding behind those ancient eyes. Finally, she stood up, extending her small hand to him. "Can I go home?" His heart clenched at hearing the word home. "Yes, you can go home." The return journey was tense. The girl slept most of the time, and he could see how exhausted she was. Her breathing was shallow, irregular, and several times he had to check if she was still alive. When they arrived at the mansion, the boy had been unconscious for 2 days. The doctors had exhausted all options and were openly talking about preparing the family for the inevitable. The stepmother was genuinely desperate, finally realizing the magnitude of the mistake she had made. The girl entered the boy's room without saying a word. She approached the bed, placed her little hands on his face, and closed her eyes. What happened next was more dramatic than the first time. A soft light began to emanate from her hands, visible even in daylight. The temperature in the room seemed to increase, and everyone present felt a strange energy in the air. The boy opened his eyes slowly, but this time it was different. He didn't just get better, he seemed stronger than ever. His color returned to normal, his breathing normalized, and when he sat up in bed, his movements were firm and confident. But the girl collapsed. The millionaire caught her before she hit the ground, feeling how her tiny body was too hot, as if a terrible fever consumed her from within. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was almost imperceptible. "Call an ambulance!" he shouted, but the girl opened her eyes and shook her head weakly. "No," she whispered, "I need to go back, to my real home, where I can learn to control it without hurting myself." It was then that the old housekeeper, who had returned to work that same day, approached with tears in her eyes. "I know that place," she said. "My own grandmother was from the Healer's Hollow. I can take her there." The millionaire looked at the girl in his arms, then at his son, who was recovering miraculously, and made the most difficult decision of his life. "Then we'll all go together." The stepmother, seeing the scene, realized that she had lost much more than an opportunity for inheritance. She had almost destroyed a family and condemned 2 innocent children. Can I go too?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I want to help fix what I broke." 2 days later, a small caravan was following the mountain roads towards the lost Healer's Hollow. The millionaire had liquidated some of his investments, converting millions into cash, determined to use his fortune to find a way for the girl to use her gifts without destroying herself in the process. When they finally arrived at the hollow, they were greeted by an 80-year-old woman with eyes identical to the girl's. It was Hope Santos, the grandmother who had rejected her daughter years ago, but who now wept as she recognized the granddaughter she thought she had lost forever. "She has come home," whispered the elder, holding the girl in her arms. "My little healer has returned to learn what she needs to know." 3 years passed. The girl, now 7 years old but still appearing physically fragile, had learned not only to control her gifts, but to use them without completely sacrificing herself. Under the tutelage of her wise grandmother, she discovered that she could heal by sharing the pain instead of absorbing it entirely, distributing the weight between her and the patient in a way that both could bear. The millionaire built a clinic in the hollow, using part of his fortune to bring modern medical equipment that complemented the ancestral techniques. The stepmother, transformed by the experience, dedicated herself to caring for the orphaned children of the region. And the boy grew strong and healthy, visiting the girl regularly and developing a deep understanding about the true meaning of sacrifice and love. When the girl finally returned to the mansion, no longer as a healing tool, but as a chosen member of a family that had learned the value of humility, she brought with her something more precious than all the millionaire's investments: the wisdom that the greatest miracles happen when wounded hearts find the courage to open themselves to true love. creating a home where hope overcomes fear and where each person is valued not for what they can offer, but simply for existing.